Hello and welcome to a set review of the second set of the Disney Lorecana card game called Rise of Floodborns. I'm Nick Keel and I'll be your guide while we talk about pretty much every card. I'm going to go over them, but some cards are better than others, and I'll try to explain why. But to start with, we have Bashful, Hopeless, Romantic. It's a 4 for a 2/5 that quests for 3 lore, but it can't quest unless there's another 7 dwarfs in play. So on rate, if it was just 4 for a 2/5 3 lore, that would actually be a playable card. Just because of the virtue of the lack of options of 3 lore. But the fact that it requires the 7 dwarves in play means that the 7 dwarves package has to be good, and I'm not convinced that it is. But it is interesting. So now we go to Christopher Robin, 6 mana, 2/6 for 2 lore. A little less statted just on the base, but its ability makes up for it, because if you ready the character through card effect or just once per turn at the beginning of your turn, and you have 2 or more characters, you gain 2 lore. So that effectively makes him like a 4 lore card, which is very powerful. It just remains to be seen if you can manipulate void states in a way that you're always gaining that 2 lore every turn. And if you can, it's going to be very powerful. If you can't, then it probably won't be the best card to play. It is very similar, though, with Stitch Carefree Surfer, in that they do similar things by triggering on 2 or more characters. It's just that Christopher Robin is a little bit more aggressive in that you gain lore, whereas Stitch 7 is a little bit more reactive, where you draw cards so you can have more interaction and just more card advantage. All right, Cinderella 1 for a 1/2, 1 lore. Singer 3. Now this card is interesting. On race, 1 for a 1/2 isn't very good. It will never trade up, basically, unless they play something with 1 health. So when you evaluate a card like this, you're looking at the ability, the Singer 3, as the reason why you play this card. And in a deck like Amber Amethyst, where you can play friends on the other side on turn 2, it's very powerful. And in that color combination as well, you also have Be Our Guest, which is another song that you can sing with Cinderella as not to lose too much advantage. And also in that deck, you can also get to play Ariel, so you'll probably always have a song 3 or less to sing. But it just remains to be seen if that Singer 3 can get over the hurdle of that 1/1/2, because this thing is going to die. And when it dies, it's going to do a very marginal impact on the board. It's just going to put a damage counter somewhere. So that you just have to really understand if there is a cost to playing this card, but is the reward of being able to deploy your 3 ink songs early, is that worth the ability, the fact that you have to play a 1/2, which isn't the worst thing. It's just it's not as good as other 1-drop options in my mind. Cobra Bubbles, 7/5/9/2. This is just worse than Carefree Surfer. They basically are the same card, except Cobra has some more vanilla added to him. We can just move on. All right, Doc, our second 7 dwarves. So 3 for a 2/3. A little low on what you want to play, but it isn't the worst thing. 2 lore, that's good. So it's not that embarrassing when you play it. And the ability, whenever this character quests, you may pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. Now that's a very interesting ability. It lets you accelerate your curve by a turn if you get to quest with it. And it's, besides Smash, there isn't really that much that gets this. Besides, like the format defining combination of Tinkerbell 6 and Grab Your Swords to be able to deal 3. So, I don't know, this card, if the deck you want to play wants to jump from 3 to 6, then you look at this card, because outside of Sapphire, there are very little ways to actually accelerate ink. And this card does that. There's another card in this set that does that, and I'll touch on it more when I get to it. But, I wouldn't be surprised to see people playing with this card, trying it out. I'm not sure if it's good enough, because a 3 ink 2/3 is underrated. You really want your 3s to be 3/4s, just because they can threaten the board so well. But, sometimes you just have to pick. You don't get the ability to play the best card. You just play what's given. All right, Dopey. Always Playful. 3 for a 2/2, not good. And 1 lore, also not good. When this card is banished, your other 7 dwarf characters get +2 attack until the start of your next turn. Yeah, it's so this card is bad. Nothing about like the reason why you play this card is to activate its ability, but that requires you to be able to banish this card. And the way you can do that is just through the natural combat. And it is cool that if they kill it first, your other dwarves get a little extra power, so it might be harder for them. But like since you don't really get blockers in this game, unlike a game like Magic the Gathering, it's very hard to selectively decide which one of your characters dies, since your opponent can just sequence their attacks around your onboard interaction. Like having a bodyguard, they can just sequence their attacks around it to make sure that you don't get maximum value out of Dopey. But they can't all be hits. Eudora Accomplice Seamstress, 5192. That's a lot of butt. It's a lot of defense for a 5-drop. That's basically what this card is. If you're looking for a very defensive card, say you're playing, you've noticed that your 5-drop slot hasn't been cutting it because you want a Rapunzel after it. This card is very good with Rapunzel, but you have to get around the fact that it only has 1 attack. So it requires, it's like a weird build around me card for no reward at all. So I don't think it's very playable, but I could be wrong. It's just, and then Gaston, Baritone Bully, 3 for a 3/3/1, 1 lore. Singer 5. Now this is an interesting card because Singer 5 is really good in Amber Steel, just because most of your impactful songs do cost 5. So being able to have a plethora of options, not just Ariel 3, but also Gaston, it might. I don't know if I will play it, but it's something to consider because Singer 5 is a very powerful ability in the right deck. All right, Grand Duke Advisor to the King, 2/2/2/1. Your prince, princesses, and king and queen cards get +1 attack. So now this is interesting. I've actually played a lot with princesses, just because I think it's actually viable in a tournament idea. It's just the biggest issue with princesses is that you could never beat Amethyst Ruby Control. Your deck just lost to Arath. But the fact that this thing basically increases the attack of your princesses makes it so that sometimes your curve options in that deck will trade up, which is, it's definitely worth testing to see if this card, the fact that if you can play a 2/2/2, that doesn't really impact the board that much besides increasing the attack of your other characters. It's just, it's hard to think if this card will actually have an impact on the format, since princesses really aren't doing anything in the competitive meta right now. So if you like the princesses deck, I would recommend looking at this card and just trying it out, seeing if it is relevant, because it might be. And if it is relevant, it's probably going to be very good. But if it's not relevant, it's going to be close to unplayable. Grumpy Bad Temper, 4/3/4/1. Your other 7 dwarves here just get +1. So it's kind of like the last card we were talking about. It's different because it costs 4 and it's a 3/4. That's fine for a stat line, but it's not super good. Like, you're never trading up. You're only you're trading. It's hard to trade with your opponent in a 1-for-1 manner with this card. Just 4 for 3/4 is just not big enough to contest the other 4 drops. And that ability, while it is cool, I don't know how good it'll be because I haven't really seen a dwarf with a lot of toughness. So basically they're just one-shot attacks because you're not like getting value trades. You're just trading straight up. So far the 7 dwarves haven't really impressed me, but we got a couple more. And we got another one, Happy, 5 for a 3/5/2 with support. 5 for a 3/5. 5 toughness is a break point. There's a lot of 4 power allies in characters in the game, and you really want your 5-drop to do something very spectacular. It's just like the 5-drops have to contend with Tink 6, Cusco, Emperor Cusco 5, and basically Dragonfire in certain decks, and Amber Steel as well. The 5. So in Amber, it doesn't really contest with the 5 because the 5s aren't really that good. But when you think about it in the terms of a deck list, like the 7 dwarves want you to play a lot of 7 dwarves. But unfortunately, their synergies don't make up for the fact that they are mostly overcosted right now. So I wouldn't recommend playing 7 dwarves. But you do you. King Louis, Jungle VIP, 7 for a 3/8/2. Whenever another character is banished, you may remove 2 damage from this character. So this card is very hard to deal with in combat. Because it's whenever another character is banished, not just itself, means you can structure your turn by trading up until you can get more value out of your Louis. Also, notably, it's not whenever your character, it's another character. So it can trigger on your opponent's turn as well, which is interesting. But 7 for a 3/8 just really isn't that threatening. Honestly, by the time you play King Louis, I wouldn't be surprised if your opponent, say you play King Louis on 7 and your opponent develops a 7-drop, I wouldn't be surprised if Louis has a hard time contesting that 7-drop because of its low stats, low attack. But you can get around that by using cards with support. There are some cards that increase attack. But do you really want to design your deck around a 7-drop that requires synergy pieces when the payoff isn't win the game? It's just have an efficient creature. That's for you to decide. I don't think it's unplayable. I just don't think it's very powerful. Mickey Friendly Face, 6/1/6/3. Whenever this character quests, you may pay 3 for the next character you play. I actually like this card a lot. It solves the issue that I had with Amber Steel in that when you control the game with that deck, it's very hard to actually close out because you don't have any 3 lore cards. So this kind of solves that effect. I've noticed in this set there are a lot more 3 lore cards, but when this card was first spoiled, I was very high on this card. And as I've seen more of the spoilers, I'm still gonna try it, but I'm not sure if it's what the number is. Do you play 1? Do you play 2? Do you play 3? Do you play 4? That's something that will happen in playtesting. I wouldn't be surprised if this card got cut because they're just more powerful cards. But if this card was in set 1, it would have definitely been played, I feel. Mufasa, Betrayed Leader. When this character is banished, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you may play that character for free and they enter the play exerted. Otherwise, put it on top of your deck. 5/3/3/2. So it's weird, right? Like, so this character is just designed to die, and then you just pachinko a random card out of your deck. Now, in order to fully utilize this card, you have to play a lot of expensive cards, but you also have to play a lot of characters. And unfortunately, there's no deck right now that is playing just almost exclusively characters. And if they are playing a lot of characters, they're playing a lot of cheap characters. So that's not something that you want to hit off of Mufasa. And also, right now, there are very few ways to manipulate the top of your library, so you can't even just pick and choose what you get. But if they do print a card that can set this up, it might be very powerful as a way to generate a temporary resource advantage. Because if you say you play your Mufasa on 5, and then you attack something on turn 6, if you hit a 7-drop, that's actually a resource positive play because you only invested 5 into your 7. Or even if you hit a 6, that's still tempo positive. You're generating a resource. But if you hit a 5, that's tempo neutral. That's fine too. But there's just no way to guarantee that it'll hit something impactful. But it's one of those cards that as more cards get spoiled, it's always good to look at. All right, Mulan Free Spirit, 3/2/3/2 support. it's a princess, which is always nice. Having support, princesses actually is a deck that likes support because it doesn't really, besides Let It Go, it does in Hades 7, it doesn't really have a way to interact with the board. So having support gives them the tools to maintain a board advantage, especially since in order to use support, you have to lore. So you're generating victory points, basically. You're marching towards the end of the game while also impacting the board. So 3 for a 2/3, again, is understated in my mind. But it is a princess, so I wouldn't be surprised if people are playing princess in their princess deck. All right, Mulan Reflecting. 4/3/3/2. Shift 2. Whenever this card quests, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a song card, you may play it for free. Otherwise, put it on top of your deck. So this card is similar to Mufasa in that it can generate a card, but different from Mufasa, where Mufasa has to die. This card can generate value every turn. Unfortunately, again, there is no real way to manipulate the top card of your deck besides Mulan's reflecting the song card, but that card isn't very good. But eventually I will imagine they will print cards that will let you manipulate the top card of your deck. So this is one of those cards where you just make a note of it, and you can even play it now, because in Amber Steel, just like randomly hitting any of their expensive songs is very good. But I don't know if it's consistently good enough to warrant a slot in a tournament deck. Definitely a fun build around though. Nana, Darling Family Pet, 2/1/3/1. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, you may remove all damage from chosen character. Now, I'll touch on Floodborn eventually, but right now, the Floodborn characters, there's just not that enough of them. So, like, in order to play a Floodborn character, you usually have to jump through a few hoops, and then, so you have all these cards that trigger on playing a Floodborn character, but some of them don't really do that much. Like this one, it can be very powerful in certain board states, but like it doesn't impact the board immediately. 2 for a 1/3 is below rate. It's at least it's not a 1/2, but it's never trading up. It might trade horizontally, but it's very hard to get a trade below, because they're just unless there are cards that you're worried about, like Lilo 1 or Maleficent 1. In general, I would err on the side of caution of playing against cards like this, just because it's so situationally. Like, removing all damage from a character can be value. It's just very situationally value. And is this kind of card better than a card like Rapunzel at removing damage? No. So, it's just, maybe there'll be some combo deck someday that just utilizes it. But right now, nothing. Piglet, Very Small Animal, 3/2/4/2. This card's close. A 3-mana 2 lore card is very good, but in this color you have Shmi, which is kind of the better version of this, just because you don't really care if your 3 ink card lores or not. You're usually playing it either to advance your board state or interact with your opponent's board state. So on that note, Piglet, Very Small Animal, not very good. Just filler. Rapunzel, Gifted Artist, 5/0/6, Shift 3. Whenever you remove one or more of your damage from one of your characters, you may draw a card. So like this obviously combos very well with cards that remove damage counters, but unlike Rapunzel 4, where you get the cards immediately, this one requires you to jump through some hoops. And it's already pretty hard to get damage counters on your card if your opponent is playing correctly. So I don't know, just spending 5 ink on an 0/6, I don't know if that's a good enough play to really warrant an inclusion. Because the matchups that this would shine in is a matchup where there's a lot of creature combat, but it's not just characters jumping into each other. It is characters that have low attack and high health, just chipping away at each other. And generally speaking, boards don't develop like that because it's very obvious, since most players really do respect the Rapunzel for, which is rightfully so. That card is game winning. All right. Rapunzel Sunshine, 2/1/4/1. Tap, remove 2 damage from chosen character. So, I don't really like this card. I would call this more like Cinderella 4 from the first set. It's probably a better version of that just because it's cheaper and it can remove from any character than a chosen character. I have played some Cinderella. Cinderella's fine. So, the reasons why I don't like this card, even though it is better than a card I've already played, is because it's just a 2/1/4. So, which does give some value. It's hard to get more value than the ability. And by the time you're activating the ability, you don't really want to expose your 2-drop in that way, because it has to be face up. That's the reason, is that your opponent knows about your ability to use magic hair to remove 2 damage. So they can play around it, whether they don't lore at all so you don't have any attacking targets, or whether they, just kill your card and just leave you with a 1/4. I will say, though, if they ever make a card like Injured Blade Master from Hearthstone, cards like this do get better. Sleepy Nodding Off, 2/2/3/2. This character enters play exerted. When I saw this card, I was actually happy about it. I was thinking of, because it's a 2/3/2 for 2, but unfortunately we live in this environment where there's a 2-mana 3/3 that I think is very playable. So playing a 2/3 for 2, just that has to come into play exerted, might just give your opponent a free value trade. So the downsides to this card, I think, outweigh the benefits, because sometimes you don't want your 2-drop to come into play tapped. Even if you can get like a few lore off of it, the fact that you have to expose it for 1 turn can mean that you might just be paying 2 ink just to put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's characters, which isn't a good exchange. Sneezy, Very Allergic, 2/1/4. Whenever you play this character or another Seven Dwarfs character, you may give the chosen character -1 attack this turn. Okay, so this is a good payoff. It's cheap. It has a good defensive statting, so you can't smash it. 4 is a very good number to have. It only has 1 lore, so you don't really have to lore with it, but you can lore in a pinch. And the effect does allow you to value trade. So this is probably one of the better Seven Dwarves I've seen, but still, I don't think it makes the archetype. It's just, the archetype's just a little too clunky. Though I do love the flavor behind it, for what that's worth. Snow White, Lost in the Forest, 2/2/3. All right, so you just get a free 2/3 with an ability. When you play this character, you may remove up to 2 chosen damage from this character. This card is just better than Minnie Mouse, and I was already playing Minnie Mouse and Princesses. So yeah, this card is just strictly better than Minnie Mouse, unless you need Minnie Mouse to shift on. But that's actually really interesting. Yeah, I like it. It's just a 2-mana 2/3 that's right rate for a 2-drop. The 1 lore, that's fine, and it provides additional value sometimes. Good card. All right, Snow White, Unexpected House Guest, 2 for a 1/2. You may pay 1 less to play 7 Dwarves characters. I understand what they were going for the 7 Dwarves archetype. This card is bad. It just like, so you live in this world where you go from 2 to 4, but you also have to realize that this card is uninkable. And now I'm going to talk about uninkables. There's a limit to how many uninkables you can have in a deck. I found that 13 is the upper limit, and I wouldn't recommend paying 13. You have to be kind of a madman, and your deck kind of has to have ways to generate extra cards in order for you to justify all those uninkables that you're going to draw. And you also have to resign yourself to just 5% of the time. You won't play the game. You will just draw all your uninkables and you will die, which is fine. The sweet spot that I found is like 7 or 8 uninkables. So really spending your uninkable slot on a mana accelerant isn't really that powerful, because ink acceleration gets better the more flexible it is. And since this card can't be inked, it's not that flexible. It only does one thing. And this game definitely punishes you for that, because there'll be, if you play 4 of this card, there'll be some times where you just after mulligan have like 2 or 3 in your hand. And now you have 3 2-mana 1/2s, which your opponent like can deal with. And all in all, I don't really like that card. All right, here's the Snow White boss. Snow White Well-Wisher. Shift 4. 6 mana 3/5 uninkable. That's reasonable because shift 4, so 4 mana 3/5 is okay. And whenever this character quests, you may return a character card from your discard to your hand. Okay, so this card is a different version of Hades. Hades 4, the one that returns, that has the same effect. Except this card is required to quest. So how do you solve that? Either you play it and you get to untap with it, or you shift it and you quest immediately. So with shifting it, it costs 4. Hades cost 4. So I think this card is actually a worse version of Hades. Even though it can be repeatable, it just requires you to protect it, which is very hard sometimes because you're spending your 4th turn to shift onto another Snow White. So you don't even have ways to threaten back pressure if they do deal with it in a timely manner, since you've already lost a character because you shifted onto it. But that being said, if you can develop a deck where you protect this card, you can generate some absurd value with it. It's just the value that it generates isn't as much value as other cards in the set, which I will get into later. The Queen, Commanding Presence. 5 mana 4/3/2. Shift 2. Whenever this character quests, chosen character gets -4 and chosen character gets +4. So this card's interesting. It's obviously very powerful in certain board states. The downside is that, well, yes, 2 for a 4/3 is good, but there is a 2 mana 3/3 in this set. So say you play this, I don't even know if there's a Queen 1, but Dream World. The Queen 1 into Shift 2, and then your opponent plays like a 3/3. So now you can never lore with your Queen because they'll just take the trade and they'll just get that extra card. So you have to maneuver this board state where you spent the first 2 turns doing nothing, and in fact you are punished for taking game actions until you can maneuver the board state in a way that you can get advantage. But again, this card is face up in the Dream scenario, so it's very easy to play around. Now, if you play it later in the game, it does get a little better, but you have to be able to shift onto it, and I don't know how many low cost or how many of the Queen cards you can afford to shift onto, since most of them generate advantage by themselves. So, this card is definitely powerful. It just remains to be seen if the meta will be able to, if the meta develops in a way that this card is actually playable. So another card that I would take a note of, but I wouldn't be trying to play more than 2. Because as a 5-drop, it actually is understated, so you're trying to shift. But that really requires you to have additional queens that are lower, that cost less than it. So I think this time will tell on this card. It is good, but I don't know if the meta is the right place for it to be an actual, powerful card. Speaking of Queen, here's the 1-drop Queen I was thinking about. 1/2/2/1. Nothing wrong with this. Though I will say that I think that the meta coming up will be a 1/3 meta. So that just means that the 2/2s are they're in a weird spot. They trade with the 1/3 for 1s. There's just a bunch of them. I'm not going to tell you all of them because I think every color has one now. But this does allow you to shift onto Queen early, which is nice because say your opponent plays a 2/2, then you play your 2/2. Then on turn 2, they play their 2/3, and then you shift onto Queen and kill their 1/3. That gets you the card, and that kind of forces them to attack their 2/3 into your 4/3 with 1 damage on it to take a 2-for-2 trade, but you've successfully managed to trade resources evenly. And you are on the draw, which is good because being on the draw means you have an additional card, which means you're already situated for the control roll, so you might be able to snowball that advantage from there. by just cleanly interacting with a person's first few turns of development. Hold still, 2 for an action. Remove up to 4 damage from chosen character. Yeah, this card's bad. I mean, like, there are better cards that remove damage in different ways that also are land. Now, if this card was a song, I'd be interested, but, like, it's worse than Hakuna Matata if it was a song. So, in that card, I play with Hakuna Matata. It's not good, but it's a land. And in order to play a card like Ariel, you need to hit it. You hit a bunch of lands. Sometimes, unlike Hold Still, which does actually nothing. 2 for an uninkable. Last Stand. Banish chosen character who was challenged this turn. Yeah, again, it's just too hard. If it was inkable, it'd be interesting. But the fact that it's uninkable means that, like, when it doesn't do anything, it really doesn't do anything. Painting the Roses Red. For our first song. 2 for a song. Up to 2 chosen characters get -1 this turn. Draw a card. This card is very interesting to evaluate. It's a land. So it's inkable. So you can find it off of Ariel. That's always nice. One thing about Ariel stock really going up is that there's just more songs. So the Ariel package you make will be more diverse and robust, which is always a good thing for your card advantage card to have more options. And this card isn't that bad. At worst case, it draws a card. And, sometimes you might be able to, like, maneuver a situation where you get 2 value trades in a card draw. And that's a lot for just 2 ink. So, I don't know if it'll be a staple 4 of, but I could see playing a couple. Next song, 3, World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Banish chosen character with 5 or more, 5 attack or more. Now, this card is interesting because right now, most of the problem cards have less than 5 attack. Like Tinkerbell 6 from set 1, it's a 4/5. Cusco is a 2/4. So, like, the cards that are played that have more than 5 power are very few and in between. And a card like this really depends on what people are playing meta-wise. Because this kind of card does kill most of the finishers out of Ruby, but those decks are playing Be Prepared. So they would actually rather you spend your deck slot on a card like this that doesn't really do anything till the later stages in the game when they should have already established control to win the game. That being said, removal spells are never really that bad, and sometimes you just need to play it just because you need a removal spell. So, yeah. Next song, 0 to Hero. 2 uninkable. Count the number of characters you have in play. You may play that amount of ink less for the next character you play this turn. This card is really interesting because it can generate a lot of tempo. By making it a song that costs 2, so say you curve 1 drop into 2 drop. Then on your turn 3, you can play a 5 drop. You can play 2 3 drops. You can play a 2 and a 4. Just depending on what's in your hand, the opportunity cost of including a card like this is very low. Sure, it's an uninkable, but that just means that you don't have to play the full 4. You can play a couple, and then you'll naturally draw them when they're good. And if they're bad, well, maybe they shouldn't be in your deck. But this type of card is a bad top deck, but it does allow you to temporarily get ahead on resources, specifically ink, which can be very powerful and almost game-winning, depending on what you're playing. Like, if you go 1 drop, 2 drop Cusco, like you're going first, and your opponent, has only 3 ink to answer a Cusco, that's just not going to happen. There are very few 4 power 3 drops being played. So then the Cusco will be able to trade up, or if they have an empty board, they have to deal with a Cusco. So this card the Cusco is just an example because I think Cusco is one of the better cards in the game, just because it really defines what kind of cards you can play, because you have to have an answer to it. Otherwise, if your answer is just hope they don't draw it, well, then they're going to get the 17 lore and they're going to play it, and you're going to look at your deck and go, oh, I guess I'm dead. All right, Dragon Gem. 3 uninkable item. Tap, 3 ink. Return a character card with support from your discard to your hand. This card is probably the worst of the return. Sure, it's repeatable, but 3 ink is a big cost, and it doesn't generate a card immediately. So you play this on like turn 6 to generate a card, and spending 6 ink to just return 1 card. And it's not just any card; it's specifically a card with support. So like there's too much restrictions. It costs too much. You're probably going to limit it though, if you have enough support cards. And the last card of Amber, Sleepy's Flute. Tap, if you play this on this turn, gain 1 lore, 2 uninkable. I mean, gaining a lore for free while doing game actions while you're just engaging with the deck is very strong. The biggest issue with this is it's uninkable, and you have to play a plethora of songs, so you're probably Amethyst Amber, in which case the songs that you're playing just kind of just spin the wheels. They don't do something really big and impactful. It's something to consider though if you find against the control lists that come out, because I'm sure control will be played. If you find that you're just a couple lore short most games, then this card is very good at solving that question of generating 1 or 2 lores. Like if I play this on 2, I'm expecting to generate like 2 to 3 lore off of it just through natural, without even thinking about it. But again, it's an uninkable, so like you don't really get that many slots. So that's Amber, and I will be sure to, if you liked this content, be sure to check out the other colors. And thanks for watching.